Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused some of his country's closest allies of, as he put it, being on the wrong side of humanity after the UK, French and Canadian leaders criticised Israel for its ongoing military escalation in Gaza and the lack of humanitarian aid being allowed into the territory. A small number of trucks carrying flour and other supplies have been allowed entry in recent days after international pressure on Israel. The video footage shows bags of bread being thrown to a desperate crowd outside a bakery in Nuseirat refugee camp. The population's been starving after an 11-week aid blockade by the Israelis. But fuel still isn't being allowed in. The United Nations says water wells in parts of the Gaza Strip are shutting down because Israel hasn't allowed any in for 80 days, with a full shutdown of water and sanitation facilities possible by the end of the week. We're also getting reports of 16 Palestinians being killed in Israeli airstrikes this morning, according to Gaza's health ministry. Here's some of what the Israeli Prime Minister said in an address on Thursday night.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
We've been speaking to our correspondents Yolande Nell in Jerusalem and Rushdie Abou-Alouf in Cairo. I asked Yolande first about this statement released by the Israeli Prime Minister.
Well, this video, he lays out some really quite extraordinary accusations against some of Israel's closest allies. And he suggests that Sir Keir and the French president, the Canadian Prime Minister, want Hamas to stay in power in Gaza. He said with their joint statement criticising Israel's expanding military offensive in the Gaza Strip earlier this week, they were emboldening Hamas to continue fighting forever. He said that these leaders were guilty also of hypocrisy, saying they'd bought into what he called Hamas's propaganda that says that Israel is starving Palestinian children. This, of course, after we have had warnings from Global Hunger Monitor saying that famine is looming in the Gaza Strip, that tens of thousands of children could be facing acute malnutrition. Now, he also said, expanding his accusations, Mr. Netanyahu, you see many international institutions are complicit in spreading lies. He said, the press repeat said, the mob believed it and a young couple is gunned down in Washington.
And this comes against a backdrop, though, of Benjamin Netanyahu facing increasing pressure at home.
That's right. He is sort of backed into a corner somewhat. There has been mounting criticism domestically and also coming at him from abroad. Although he did say that when he had spoken to President Trump in the aftermath of that shooting in Washington with 2 Israeli staff members killed, that he had been supportive of Israel's goals in Gaza, looking to the US, of course, as Israel's closest ally.
But we are also expecting a major conference, aren't we, about the idea of a two-state solution still being pursued?
That's right. And the idea of a two-state solution is the idea of creating an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel. That has for a long time been the international formula for peace here. And we have heard in recent days and weeks, as international leaders have really lost patience with Israel and its conduct of the war in Gaza, that they have been talking more and more, France in particular, saying that it will recognize an independent state of Palestine. It will be the first of the G7 countries to do so if it goes ahead. Now, that is something that the Israeli Prime Minister is vehemently against, and he has said that any leaders who take that step will be giving a reward for terrorism.
And recently as well, we've seen with Donald Trump's visit to the Gulf states that he was keen for those Arab states to normalise relations with Israel.
That's right. I mean, this has been a long time goal of President Trump and the US, particularly since in President Trump's first administration, he persuaded some key Arab countries that hadn't previously had diplomatic relations with Israel to recognize the Israeli state, to normalize their ties. That's something that was really celebrated by Israel prior to the war in Gaza, those deadly 7th of October attacks led by Hamas on Israel. That really was something that looked like it was potentially on the cards, a normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. But then what we've seen since then, Saudi Arabia totally changing its position, demanding, as have many other countries, that there should be a pathway to creating an independent Palestinian state and dealing with the conflict here, the decades-old conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, with that solution.
Thank you very much. Let's speak to Rushdie Abu-Alouf, our Gaza correspondent, who joins us from Cairo. Let's just first of all talk about the strikes overnight and the further fatalities we're hearing about. Rushdie, tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, the strike overnight, according to witnesses, some local journalists, and also Hamas government media office targeted a Hamas police unit. They were in their way to protect, as the statement of the Hamas government said, a convoy of aid was traveling from the border into the one of the warehouses for the WFP inside Gaza, in a place called Deir el-Balah in the middle of Gaza. They said the unit was engaged in an exchange of fire with some looter who were trying to attack the convoy. Then later on, Israeli airstrike, 4 missiles, killed 6 of them. The Hamas media office said that this is a crime against the people who are trying to protect aid coming into the people who are starving inside Gaza. The incident happened overnight, and according to Health Ministry this morning, 6 people were killed and about 20 injured in that incident.
And speaking of aid, just how much difference is it making, the supplies that have come in already?
Well, talking to many people across Gaza, we haven't seen any change yet in the state of famine, the state of starvation in Gaza. About 130 trucks in total were allowed into Gaza in 3 days, and most of the aid is still lying in some of the bakeries and in some of the warehouses for the UN and other aid organizations. Yesterday, there was an attempt to bake some bread and distribute it, but very chaotic situation. The hungry people attacked 2 of the bakeries in Nusayrat refugee camp, and everything turned into a chaotic scene, and the 2 bakeries who were operating yesterday had to shut down. This morning they put out a statement on Facebook saying that without a protection to our operation, we can't feed the people. So it is very complicated situation. In fact, there is about 130 trucks already in Gaza, but experts and Palestinians in Gaza said that this is a drop in the ocean. They need about 400 to 500 trucks every day for months, for at least 2 months, in order to meet the severe shortages of food. Not only food, but also, most important, is the fuel. Israel did not allow any fuel for 11 weeks, and the operations in the remaining hospital in Gaza City and the south are really facing very difficult to run their essential operation. Water well, the sewage system, the trucks that is collecting the rubbish and garbage from the streets are not functioning because of the fuel. So what is being allowed is very little, considering the state of famine in Gaza.
Rushdie Abu-Alouf in Cairo.